The fluorescent lights of the gym flickered against the polished floor, casting long shadows across the stacked wrestling mats. It was an ordinary morning at Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia. But soon, this place would become the center of one of America's most disturbing modern mysteries. The town of Valdosta, small, southern, surrounded by farmland and tight-knit neighborhoods, wasn't used to national headlines. Life here moved slowly, shaped by Friday night football, church on Sundays, and the kind of routines where everyone seemed to know one another. But beneath the ordinary hum of life, tensions, racial, social, and political, had always been present, like a fire smoldering beneath the surface. Kendrick Johnson was a bright, athletic 17-year-old. Known to friends as KJ, he was soft-spoken yet competitive, with dreams of becoming a professional athlete. He loved sports, basketball, football, and track. His family described him as fun-loving, kind-hearted, and protective of those he cared about. He was, by all accounts, a regular teenager with an extraordinary future ahead of him. But in January of 2013, that future would be cut short in the most haunting way imaginable. The first hints of unease began when Kendrick failed to return home one evening. At first, his family assumed he had stayed late with friends, maybe shooting hoops or hanging out after school. But when night fell and his bed remained empty, worry set in. This wasn't like Kendrick. He was responsible, disciplined, and always let his mother know where he was. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. His mother, Jacqueline Johnson, searched for him tirelessly, calling his phone, retracing his steps, praying she would hear his voice on the other end. But silence was all she found. Kendrick's family knew his daily routines well. He often used the school gym to store his sneakers, even sharing space in the rolled-up wrestling mats with other students to avoid locker fees. It was a small habit, seemingly insignificant, yet it would soon become the focal point of a national controversy. The next morning, January 11th, the quiet of the school gym was shattered. A group of students climbing on the bleachers spotted something unusual: a pair of white socks protruding from the inside of one of the large vertical wrestling mats. At first glance, it didn't make sense, but when students and staff moved closer, horror set in. Inside the mat, head first, body contorted, was Kendrick Johnson. Lifeless. The discovery sent shockwaves through the school. Teachers rushed to shield students from the sight, and administrators scrambled to call authorities. Paramedics arrived, but it was already too late. The gym, once a place of games and laughter, had become a crime scene. Witness accounts in those first moments were confused, chaotic. Some students described seeing blood near Kendrick's body. Others noticed his face looked swollen. Whispers spread quickly through the halls. What had happened to KJ? How did a healthy, strong teenager end up dead inside a rolled mat? The community of Valdosta was stunned. Parents clutched their children tighter, students whispered theories, and the media swarmed almost immediately. A young black student, dead, under suspicious circumstances, in a southern town with a long history of racial divides. And then came the first official statement: Kendrick's death was ruled an accident. Authorities suggested he had climbed into the mat to retrieve a shoe, slipped, and became trapped upside down. According to this theory, he suffocated, his cries unheard in the cavernous gym. But to Kendrick's family, this explanation was unthinkable. They knew their son. They knew he would never crawl into a rolled mat head first. They knew what they were seeing on his body didn't add up. The first autopsy raised even more questions. While the official cause of death was listed as positional asphyxia, essentially suffocation, the family noticed troubling signs. Kendrick's face was swollen, bruises marked his body, and when his body was exhumed, his internal organs were missing. The coroner explained this as a routine embalming process, but to the family it reeked of a cover-up. An independent pathologist hired by the Johnsons conducted a second autopsy, and his findings were stark. He concluded Kendrick's death was not accidental. Instead, the injuries suggested blunt force trauma. Theories began to circulate. Was Kendrick attacked by classmates? Did a fight in the gym escalate beyond control? Were powerful families involved in a cover-up? One name began to surface in hushed whispers, the sons of an FBI agent who attended the same school. Though no official evidence tied them to the case, online communities and activists speculated endlessly about their possible involvement. Fueling suspicion was the school's surveillance footage. Multiple cameras inside the gym had captured Kendrick's movements, but when investigators reviewed the tapes, frames were missing. The timeline was broken. Hours of footage gone. Authorities chalked it up to technical errors, but to many it looked deliberate. Kendrick's family grew louder in their fight for answers. They protested, held rallies, and demanded accountability. At one point, they even laid their son's body out for public viewing, showing the world what had been done to him. His swollen face, the missing organs, the unexplained injuries, Jacqueline Johnson said plainly. "My son was murdered." The Justice Department briefly reopened the case, but by 2016, they closed it again, citing insufficient evidence. To the Johnson family, this was not justice, it was betrayal. They accused local authorities of protecting their own, of shielding suspects with influence and connections. Theories spiraled online. Some believed Kendrick was targeted after a dispute over a girl. Others suspected retaliation linked to school sports rivalries. More extreme theories suggested law enforcement themselves had played a role. Through it all, Kendrick's family refused to remain silent. They exhumed his body multiple times, determined to find the truth no matter the cost. Each time, new inconsistencies seemed to surface. Yet still, no charges. The media amplified the case. Headlines framed it as a modern-day lynching, a chilling reminder of America's unresolved racial wounds. Civil rights leaders called for federal intervention. Activists marched with the Johnson family demanding transparency. Meanwhile, the people of Valdosta were divided. Some stood firmly with the Johnsons, convinced of foul play. Others whispered that the family was stirring trouble, chasing shadows, unwilling to accept a tragic accident. The town's fault lines deepened. Investigators faced mounting criticism. Why had crucial evidence been overlooked? Why had the school not been secured properly as a crime scene? Why were witnesses' stories so inconsistent? At every turn, it seemed the case unraveled further into doubt. But still, no one was held accountable. Years passed, and the Johnson family continued to fight. Each anniversary of Kendrick's death brought vigils, protests, and renewed calls for justice. The haunting images of his body inside the mat, circulating endlessly online, kept the case alive in the public consciousness. And yet, the silence from officials remained deafening. In 2021, the Lowndes County Sheriff briefly reopened the investigation after new evidence was presented. But once again, the conclusion was the same: no foul play. For Kendrick's parents, it was another devastating blow. Theories lingered like smoke. Some believed the cover-up was orchestrated at the highest levels of law enforcement. Others argued the tragedy was exactly as the authorities claimed, a freak accident, made worse by grief and mistrust. But to the Johnsons, and to many who followed the case, the truth felt buried, hidden beneath layers of lies, silence, and missing footage. Kendrick Johnson's story is not just about one young man. It is about a system that so often fails those who demand answers. It is about the weight of history in a place where justice has not always been blind. It is about parents who refuse to stop fighting even when the world tells them to give up. Today, Kendrick's legacy lives on as a rallying cry. His name is spoken at protests, his story studied in classrooms, his face carried on signs demanding reform. He has become more than a victim. He has become a symbol. And yet, questions linger. Who was in that gym the night Kendrick died? What really happened in those missing frames of footage? Why were the simplest answers so impossible to obtain? In Valdosta, the gym mats have long since been removed. The floors polished again, games resumed. But for those who know the story, every creak of the bleachers, every echo off the walls, feels haunted. The Johnson family still speaks his name with hope and pain intertwined. They believe one day the truth will surface. One day someone will come forward. One day Kendrick will have justice. Until then, the image remains burned into memory. A boy trapped inside a mat that should have been harmless, a mother demanding answers from a world that looks away, and a question echoing endlessly through the silence: what really happened to Kendrick Johnson?